In the months following Diana's death in August 1997, beneath the fluorescent lights of a Kensington Palace inventory room, a solicitor placed a sapphire ring into a velvet-lined tray. The ring, music, an oval salon sapphire surrounded by 14 diamonds set music by Guard and Company, had been purchased by Prince Charles in 1981 for £28,500. Music it was logged in the private estate proceedings that followed her death as personal property. Not a royal heirloom, not a crown asset, but a piece belonging to Diana, Princess of Wales. The ring was not worn, it was measured, photographed, and recorded around it. Piece by piece, a collection was assembled. Pearl chokers, emerald music, bracelets, aquamarine cocktail rings, each object holding its own archive of ceremony and private meaning. What the inventory could not record was the agreement already forming in its absence. Some inheritances are passed through legal instrument. Others are made in grief between brothers in a room without witnesses. Subscribe if you want the documented history behind the jewels Diana left her sons and what became of them. By the summer of 1997, Diana, Princess of Wales, had spent 16 years navigating the boundary between royal property and personal possession. The Cambridge Lover's Knot tiara, music, a piece she had worn more than almost any other, had been a loan from the royal collection, returned after her divorce from Prince Charles, was finalized in August 1996. Its departure was quiet and largely undocumented in public record, though confirmed in subsequent assessments of royal collection holdings. What remained in her personal ownership told a different story. Pieces given, not lent. In the final months before her death, Diana was photographed wearing the sapphire engagement ring that Charles had chosen from the Guard and Company catalog in 1981, by some accounts among the last occasions on which it was publicly documented on her hand. Around her wrist, photographs from events that year confirm she wore a gold and diamond tennis bracelet, a music gift from earlier in the marriage. These were hers, not the Crown's, not the Spencer family's, hers. When estate proceedings began in the autumn of 1997, solicitors working under the Spencer estate identified Diana's personal jewelry holdings as distinct from royal loans. The Spencer estate inventory, referenced in subsequent biographical accounts, confirmed that certain pieces, among them the engagement ring, the aquamarine cocktail ring, and the multi-strand pearl choker, belonged outright to Diana's music estate and therefore to her sons. The distinction would matter more than anyone in that room could have anticipated. What the legal record established as property, grief was already converting into meaning. The autumn following Diana's death was defined at Althorpe by decisions made in pain. Charles Spencer, music, the 9th Earl Spencer and Diana's brother, became the central figure in managing the personal effects of his sister's estate. William and Harry, then 15 and 12 years old respectively, were too young to receive their inheritances directly. Trustees and family members stood in their place, making arrangements that would govern the collection's fate for years. Reports from multiple biographical sources, including accounts later given by those close to the Spencer family, describe an informal understanding that took shape during this period. Diana's personal jewelry would eventually be divided between her two sons. William, as the elder, would receive pieces considered appropriate for a future queen consort, principal among them, the sapphire engagement ring. Harry would retain pieces of more personal sentimental value, including items Diana had worn privately or received as gifts outside the formal royal context. No publicly released legal document has confirmed the precise terms of this division. The Spencer estate's formal probate records remain private. What reached public knowledge came through interviews, biographical reconstructions, and the subsequent choices made by both princes. Choices that functioned as their own form of documentation. There was an understanding, one biographer of the Spencer family later noted, without further specification. The weight of the sapphire ring lying in its velvet tray at Kensington Palace had already shifted. It was no longer only a piece of jewelry. It was a promise made without paper in a year that had stripped ceremony of all its comfort. Between the autumn of 1997 and the early 2010s, Diana's personal jewelry largely disappeared from public view. The pieces that had defined her public adornment, the sapphire music, ring, the pearl choker she had worn in countless official portraits, the aquamarine cocktail ring, music, entered a period of institutional silence. They were held in storage accessible to the Spencer estate and in some cases to the royal household, though the precise custodial arrangements have never been publical. Why disclosed? Charles Spencer maintained custody of a portion of Diana's personal effects at Ullerp, the Spencer family estate in Northamptonshire. The house already functioned as a site of public memory. The Island Burial and Garden Memorial opened to visitors during the summer season, and Diana's possessions carried that double weight. Private grief made partially public. What the vault years established more than anything else was the power of absence. The pieces that had once caught light at music, state banquets, and charity galas now rested in cases that no camera reached. They did not disappear from public consciousness. Biographies, documentaries, and anniversary tributes kept the images circulating, but they were no longer wearable objects. They were music relics. The clasp of the sapphire ring, cool under whatever light occasionally fell upon it, held a tension that would only become visible in retrospect. 13 years of silence can feel like agreement. Music, it can also feel later like the slow accumulation of diverging interpretations. The brothers had grown into men with separate lives, separate households, and separate understandings of what their mother's jewelry was for. In October 2010, William proposed to Catherine Middleton at a private lodge in Kenya. The ring he placed on her finger was the oval Ceylon sapphire music, surrounded by its 14 diamonds that his mother had worn during her own years as Princess of Wales. Music. Clarence House confirmed the choice in a public statement issued alongside the engagement announcement on the 16th of November 2010, noting that William had carried the ring with him to Africa so that his mother could be part of a very special moment. The statement was brief and careful. It did not describe an inheritance. It described music, a gesture, but the provenance was clear. William had taken the ring from the collection of his mother's personal effects and given it a new beginning. Isai. Doing so, he converted an object of mourning, a ring measured, photographed, and set aside in the estate proceedings of 1997 into a betrothal token, and in time into the ring worn daily by a future Queen of England. The public response was immediate and emotional. Photographs from the official engagement session at St. James Music Palace showed Catherine Middleton's hand. The sapphire unmistakable, its color under the pale November light precisely as it had appeared in the Guard catalogue, in the engagement photographs of 1981, and in the inventory tray of that autumn 14 years before, music 13 years of stillness, and then a jewel box opening. The ring moved from relic to promise in a single gesture, and in doing so defined how William would relate his mother's memory in public with deliberate visible institutional care. When Harry married Meghan Markle at Windsor Castle on the 19th of May 2018, Diana's music, presence was woven through the day in ways both acknowledged and private. The most visible came not during the ceremony, but in the evening. At the private reception held at Frogmore House, Meghan wore a large aquamarine cocktail ring set in gold, its rectangular cutstone cool and luminous in the candle light that had belonged to Diana. The ring had been photographed on Diana's hand during official engagements in the 1990s, and its appearance on Meghan's finger that evening was widely noted and subsequently confirmed. Kensington Palace did not issue a formal statement about the ring's provenance music on the day, but subsequent accounts, including those from royal correspondents with access to official briefings, confirmed that it was among the personal jewelry Harry had inherited from his mother. It had passed from Diana's estate to Harry, and from Harry to his wife on the most documented day of their public lives. Alongside the aquamarine ring, a diamond bracelet described in press accounts as having belonged to Diana also appeared at events associated with the couple in the months that followed. Its precise provenance within the estate inventory was not publicly detailed, but its presence among Meghan's jewelry was noted by multiple royal correspondents, covering the couple's engagements through 2018 and 2019. What distinguished Harry's use of his mother's jewelry from William's was frequency and directness. The aquamarine ring appeared at multiple events. Diana's possessions in Harry's household were music, worn, not preserved in ceremony, but carried into the ordinary rhythm of public life. The period immediately preceding the May 2018 wedding produced, according to accounts published in subsequent years, a significant disagreement over which tiara Meghan would wear. The dispute illuminated with unexpected clarity the distinction that had always existed between Diana's personal jewelry and the broader category of royal tiaras, a category governed not by inheritance, but by permission. Tiaras held in the royal collection are not property that can be transferred between narrations at will. They are loaned to queen's music consort, to princesses, to brides for specific occasions at the crown's discretion. Diana had worn the Spencer tiara, a family piece belonging to the Spencer estate at her own wedding in 1981. She had also worn the Cambridge Lovers' Knot tiara extensively during her marriage, but it remained a royal collection piece returned to the household upon her divorce. Neither had passed to her sons. Reports published after the wedding, notably in accounts by royal biographers with documented access to those involved, suggested that discussions over the tiara choice had not proceeded smoothly, and that Meghan had ultimately worn the Queen Music, Mary Diamond Bandeau, a piece from the royal collection. The selection having been guided by the palace according to multiple accounts. Whether the Spencer tiara was formally considered at any stage was not publicly confirmed. The tiara question, regardless of its precise details, Music, revealed the boundary that the 1997 inventory had first drawn. Music Harry could give Meghan what Diana had owned. He could not give her what Diana had borrowed. The line between personal possession and crown property had not softened with time. It had waited, perfectly preserved, for the occasion that would make it visible music again. No formal document had governed the division of Diana's personal jewelry between her sons. The arrangement described in biographical accounts, William to receive pieces for a future wife, Harry to retain items of personal significance. Music had been constructed in 1997 from grief and the logic of inheritance, not from legal counsel. It assumed a future that neither boy could have imagined. Two households, two very different public roles, and two marriages separated by 7 years, and shaped by circumstances Music no estate solicitor could have anticipated. By 2018, Music, the agreement's silences had become structural. It had not accounted for the possibility that Harry might marry someone whose music public role would require the same visible connection to Diana's memory that Catherine's had. It had not specified which pieces fell into which category. It had not established what would happen if both brothers chose to honor their mother through jewelry simultaneously visibly, and in ways that inevitably invited comparison. There was an understanding one Spencer family biographer had written capturing the mood of autumn 1997 in 4 words. By 2018, that understanding was being interpreted by two men who had lived inside it for more than 20 years and arrived Music, through separate experience at different conclusions. The informal nature of the arrangement, its existence only in family memory, never in witnessed ink, meant that neither interpretation was wrong. It also meant that neither was binding. What had functioned as a covenant between brothers was revealed under the pressure of changing circumstances to be something closer to an assumption. Assumptions, as the historian of royal objects understands, music, are not the same as agreements. The weight of the sapphire ring had always been unevenly distributed. Between the wedding in May 2018 and the announcement of the couple's decision to step back from senior royal duties in January 2020, Meghan wore pieces associated with Diana with notable regularity. The aquamarine ring appeared at the evening reception at the Centre Barley Polar match at Windsor Great Park in July 2018, and at several official events during the couple's tour of Australia, Fiji, Tonga, Music, and New Zealand that autumn. Royal correspondence covering the couple documented the appearances consistently, and fashion and royal press records from that period include repeated references to the pieces. The visibility was deliberate. Harry had spoken publicly across several years about the importance of keeping his mother's memory present. Meghan, in interviews from the period, described Diana as a figure she had come to know through Harry's remembrance and example. The jewelry was part of that language, a public acknowledgement worn on the body of connection and continuity. For some observers, the frequency crossed a threshold. Commentary in the British press, careful to frame itself as cultural interpretation rather than accusation, suggested that the regularity of the appearances risked overclaiming a legacy that Diana's elder son had chosen to deploy more selectively. Whether that reading was fair or not, it formed part of the public record. Documented opinion that shaped how each new appearance was received. The question that formed quietly through those 2 years whose grief entitled them to speak most loudly through the medium of their mother's gemstones, was never asked aloud between the brothers. Jewelry, as the curators of royal collections have long understood, speaks precisely because the wearer does not have to. In January 2020, Harry and Meghan announced their intention to step back from senior royal duties to divide their time between the United Kingdom and North America, and ultimately to establish independent lives in California. The announcement, made without prior consultation with the palace, accelerated a process of separation that had been building through the preceding 2 years. By the summer of 2020, Frogmore Cottage in Windsor had been vacated. With the couple went Diana's personal jewelry, the aquamarine ring, the bracelet, and other pieces Harry had inherited into a private household on the other side of the world. No public inventory was released. No accounting of what remained in the United Kingdom and what had moved to California entered the record. The pieces that had appeared at public engagements between 2018 and 2020 became once again invisible. No longer accessible to the documentary language of state events and royal double portraits. The informal agreement of 1997 had imagined 2 brothers in the same country within the same institutional framework, subject to the same constraints of royal life. It had not imagined California. It had not imagined a household that had removed itself from the crown's orbit and carried in its luggage a portion of the most publicly recognized personal jewelry collection in the world. The sapphire ring remained in England on the hand of a future queen. The aquamarine ring had crossed an ocean. The distance between them was not only geographical, it was interpretive. 2 different answers to the same inheritance, now too far apart to compare in the same light. Through the years of public debate about Harry and Meghan's departure, William offered no public statement about the division of his mother's jewelry. Neither did Catherine, Princess of Wales. The sapphire ring, present at every official engagement, clearly visible in every formal portrait session, was the only piece from Diana's personal collection that appeared with any regularity in the Wales household's public documentation. Its appearances were contextual and measured. Catherine had worn the ring at the official engagement announcement music. In November 2010, in the formal portraits taken by Mario Testino in photographs from the 2011 wedding, and in every subsequent official session in which her hands were visible. She had also worn on specific occasions the 3-strand pearl choker that had belonged to Diana, but with notably less frequency and in context state events, formal receptions, where the gesture read as institutional tribute rather than daily display. The restraint was its own form of statement. Among those who studied the royal family's use of visual symbolism, the contrast between the 2 households' approaches to Diana's jewelry was legible, even without accompanying commentary. Catherine wore the ring with consistency and the pearl choker with deliberate selectivity. The choice to wear rarely and only at scale communicated something that could not have been expressed in words, without inviting the comparison it clearly sought to avoid. She speaks through jewelry as if through a second language. One royal historian observed of the general discipline of royal adornment. The observation applied without adjustment to how Diana's legacy was being managed in the decade after her sons had grown into their full inheritance. By the early 2020s, the legal question of ownership over Diana's personal jewelry had no public resolution. The Spencer estate's probate records had never been published. The informal agreement of 1997 had never been formalized. What was known was limited to what could be observed. Certain pieces had been distributed between 2 brothers, and those brothers had used them in ways that reflected their separate understandings of what the distribution had meant. The question of ownership in the strictly legal sense was perhaps less interesting than the question of custody. The difference between holding something and being entitled to determine its meaning. Diana's jewelry had passed to her sons as personal property under standard probate law, not the Crown's jurisdiction. The Crown had no formal claim. Neither brother had formally disputed the other's portion. Some legal commentators in broader discussions of royal inheritance had noted that personal jewelry belonging to a non-reigning member of the royal family is governed by the same framework that applies to any private estate. What Diana owned, her sons inherited as private individuals. The distribution between them had been a family matter, music not a constitutional one. What remained unresolved was not a legal dispute. It was an interpretive one, a disagreement never spoken as such, about whose grief entitled them to speak most clearly through the medium of gemstones. The vault that had held the pieces through the 1990s and 2000s had preserved them perfectly. It could not preserve the agreement that had always existed. Only in the shared memory of two boys who had become different men. The archive of Diana's jewelry, read from 1997 to the present, discloses something that no biography has fully articulated. The two brothers chose different forms of fidelity to their mother, and their choices in adornment are the most visible record of that divergence. William's approach, the sapphire ring placed on Catherine's hand as an act of tribute, worn thereafter with consistency and institutional care, is an act of continuity. It situates Diana within the ongoing narrative of the monarchy, converting personal loss into dynastic memory. The ring does not grieve, it inherits. Music Harry's approach, the aquamarine ring worn by Meghan at the private reception, the bracelet appearing at informal engagements, the frequency of visible deployment, is an act of personal possession. It insists on Diana as a private rather than institutional presence, as someone whose memory belongs to her sons first and to the crown, not at all. Both choices are defensible. Both carry the weight of real grief. Neither is wrong, but they are in their symbolic grammar incompatible. And the jewelry that expressed them was always finite. There was only one aquamarine ring. There was only one engagement ring. The informal agreement of 1997 had assumed silently that the brothers would want the same things from their mother's legacy. By the 2020s, it was apparent they did not. On paper, the jewels had been divided. In practice, the meaning attached to them had multiplied in directions no inventory could contain. Informal portraits of the Princess of Wales, circulated through 2023, Catherine's left hand is consistently documented. The sapphire unmistakable in official photographs released by Kensington Palace. The stone catches the light precisely as it did in the official engagement photograph taken in November 2010 music, and as it did in the GD catalog image from 1981, and as it appeared unmistakably in photographs taken during Diana's final years as Princess of Wales. 3 decades of the same stone catching the same quality of light. 3 women's hands. Diana's music, Catherine's. And between them, the invisible trace of an infantry tray in a Kensington Palace room in the autumn of 1997. The ring music had not changed. The hands that held it had somewhere beyond England an aquamarine cocktail ring set in gold, rest in circumstances that no public inventory documents. The bracelet that appeared at several engagements between 2018 and 2019 has not been photographed at a public event since January 2020. What remains at Althorpe in the Spencer family's private holdings has never been enumerated in a public record. The inventory of autumn 1997 recorded what could be measured. It could not record what the pieces meant or what would happen to those meanings when the brothers who inherited them chose differently. Music, the sapphire ring is still on a hand in England. The clasp holds. The rest remains in a vault or beyond it, catching no light that any camera has yet.